so nice to have you guys here. I am joined today by Shannon and Louie. I am so excited for today because we are jumpstarting a brand new series called Workflow Wins, where we're going to get somebody who is inside of Hubly getting that implementation done inside of their office and just pick your brains and allow you guys in the audience to ask questions. I'll go ahead and allow Shannon and Louie to introduce themselves, and then we'll go from there.
Thanks, Nora. I'm so happy to be here with you guys today. My name's Shannon Beahan. I'm with Lindsay & Lindsay Wealth Management out of Southern California. And we have been on Hubly, I think, about 3 years, and just have really, it's fundamentally changed the way that we do business. I say that to everybody. So happy to share some of those insights and answer questions.
Awesome.
Hi,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Louie. I'm the now product owner and co-founder at Hubly. I've been with Hubly since day one. I still remember when I first met Shannon and the team, and I immediately knew when we hopped off the call, my team and I were chatting, we're like, this team is going to be an amazing Hubly customer and long term, and we were looking for it right. I still look to Shannon for product advice. I am still in awe every time I get to see and witness the workflows that Shannon and her team have built. I'm like sometimes intimidated by them. I'm like, could I even build workflows that good? And I worry about that sometimes. And so just grateful to be here and excited to dive a little bit deeper to, I'll hopefully also learn something from Shannon and her team, and happy to share any additional insights from the work that we've done with other customers.
I love that because you definitely have a vision, and then someone like Shannon taking it beyond that is really great. So Shannon, tell me about your firm. How is your firm made up? What technology are you using?
Yeah, so we are a hybrid firm. So most of our business is through our RIA relationship. We're a team of 3 certified financial planners, and we're all accredited estate planners as well. And so that kind of steers the type of client that we work with and the type of work that we do. We do a lot of complex planning for high net worth families, business owners, people that are very busy with a lot going on. So it's very important that we are, concise and following up with people and making sure that the work gets done. So the 3 advisors function as an ensemble. So of course there are, clients that are used to working with 1 or 2 of us, but functionally one of our visions for our firm is that any client could be helped by any advisor at any time. And Hubly is actually a really crucial tool in allowing us to do that, which I can talk a little bit more about why. And then we're supported by a team of 8 staff members. And the way that we organize our staff is by function rather than, I think a lot of advisors with multiple advisors organize it by dedicated clients. These service team members work with these clients. We organize it by function. So we have team members that are dedicated to opening new accounts and team members that are dedicated to money movement functions. We also are developing a stack of our advisory stack with support in the paraplanner role as well. So it's been really nice for Hubly. The way that Hubly is organized is you can create teams by function. So that has aligned really well for us in the way that, we are able to assign workflows to different parts of our company.
Really great. And I can see that strategically working out well because you're empowering them to take ownership over certain parts of the process. Sometimes that diffusion of responsibility happens where, one of the 8 of us are supposed to open the account, but that person will do it and that person will do it. And you'll kind of point fingers and it won't get done. Mm-hmm. So that's really nice to kind of perfect it and make sure someone is in charge and they just get better and better at it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's muscle memory. One of the ways we handle that is we have on each team, there's kind of a primary team member. And that team member then will see when tasks get assigned to that team member will then delegate out, and actually assign the individual team member to that particular task or that particular workflow to kind of help manage that workload amongst the team.
Oh, that makes sense. Really great. So it sounds like there is a perfected process, and then in the
Well, I would say
moment,
perfect.
but kind of in the moment, depending on workload, depending on maybe the client, it gets assigned out differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that is really great about Hubly too is it allows transparency for the whole team to be able to see, what is on any given team member's plate. You can kind of toggle and say, well, these are all the things that are open for team member A or team member B. And so as a manager or as a team lead, it allows you to then say, okay, this person has the capacity to take on, additional tasks at this point.
Really great. And do you guys have internal team meetings, sales meetings, things like that?
Yeah, we have a full team meeting every Monday, our staff meeting, and Hubly's a part of that. One of the things that we do, I kind of think one of the best practices around Hubly, if anybody is just diving into it, is around the use of dashboards and kind of the different types of dashboards that you can create and utilize for different purposes. And we've created a dashboard that we call Pipeline. And what that particular dashboard shows us is all of our new accounts, people that are being onboarded, and the various workflows that are associated with that sort of, the beginning of a relationship. And so it allows us as a team to look at, okay, where are we at in the process for all of these people that are onboarding with us? Is somebody stuck in a TOA workflow, for example, because there's a problem? We need, some additional documentation or another signature, or the client's not being responsive. And so it allows us to all look at where we're at in that process and see who, if anyone, should be taking action on any of those open items. So it all kind of gets us on the same page about what we've got open at the moment.
Great. And how often does that happen and you are able to adjust the workflow? Or is it kind of like, let's see if this happens again, and
Mhm.
then we'll go in and adjust, kind of continuously improving that established process?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the meeting itself happens once a week, and so that's kind of our level set. But of course, our teams are looking at those workflows every single day, and making modifications as needed. But I think from a larger perspective, that evaluation of a workflow, that's constant. I think I wouldn't anytime I talk to anybody about Hubly, it's not like you onboard and then you're done. It's really something that has been continuously evolving for us. As I mentioned, I think we're almost at about 3 years, which doesn't even seem real that has gone by so quickly. But and in that 3 year time period, I mean, of course, a lot of the work is done on the front end, but it for us and our team really has been a constant evolution. We prioritized certain workflows that we knew we needed some organization around or that were frequently used. But then we had these kind of generic catch all buckets. And we started to see patterns of this type of task is consistently going in this miscellaneous bucket. So, hey, maybe we need to build it its own workflow. So, we have continued to develop and create additional workflows and additional processes as we've gotten both more comfortable with Hubly, but also as our business has changed and the efficiency that Hubly creates for us has allowed additional capacity, and we're able to kind of make sure that we are continuing to evolve Hubly as we evolve. So it's certainly not a once and done type of thing for our team. It's something that we are constantly monitoring, bringing up new ideas about how to modify workflows or workflows that we need to create to continue to drive that efficiency for our team.
Let me
Great.
jump in here quick, Nora.
Yeah.
Um, I just want to comment on three things there that I think Shannon just absolutely nailed. Is one, Hubly is just a tool. What Shannon and her team have done a fantastic job at is making workflow and process improvement part of their culture. And I spend a lot of time on sales calls with different firms where they're looking for a silver bullet in a technology solution. And I'm afraid silver bullets really don't exist in this world. But what is the silver bullet is making workflow and process improvement part of your culture, because over time you'll see significant leaps and bounds and improvements in how you service your clients, how you work as a team, and ultimately improving your productivity. And so I'm a huge advocate for firms that come to us and the best Hubly customers are ones that want to adopt a workflow culture first and foremost, and then are looking for the right tool to actually lead the charge with that. That's one comment I wanted to make. The second one is, I think Shannon touched on just an absolute piece of gold there, is where they had some really obvious workflows to start with, but the rest were non-obvious. And what her and her team did is they really evaluated the one-off tasks that seem like one-off tasks, but aren't really one-off tasks. They're likely workflows that need to be built out. And I just wanted to provide anyone on the call with a little trick on, if you are looking to get started with workflows, but it just feels very overwhelming. Something you can do is actually just export all of your one-off tasks from your CRM or whatever to-do list tracker you and your team have today. Upload that data into a ChatGPT or Claude and just ask the AI to be like, hey, what are our most frequently completed one-off tasks? Those are normally going to be your obvious workflows to build first. And the last comment I'll make, and I want to actually turn this back to Shannon and ask a question, is what I find with a lot of ensembles that I talk to that are set up similar to you is, obviously there's your role as the lead advisor and work you have to do with clients, but I'm always fascinated how the ensemble splits the rest of the leadership duties around who's in charge of technology, who's in charge of operations. I know you're primarily in that role of COO, technology and operations. Can you provide any insights into how you guys split the business operating functions from a leadership standpoint? Because I find that's really a place a lot of ensembles struggle with, is there's no clear ownership in who's actually leading technology or operations or other parts of the business. And I think that's a really important piece for folks to get right for any successful technology implementations.
Mm-hmm. So we were introduced by some of our peers to this idea of EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, books like Traction. And our team read the book Rocket Fuel, which talks about kind of the major roles inside of a firm. And there tends to be two main roles that you see pretty frequently in successful firms, and that would be the visionary and the integrator. The visionary tends to be that very big picture, very ambitious in making, goals and big, ambitious projects for the future, kind of the long-term vision, handles a lot of the big, outside relationships. And the integrator tends to be the person that takes that vision and makes it a reality, and is the person that's more, mindful of how things are actually going to get done, and that procedural and policies type of mindset. And it really tends to be your natural inclination. And so that book for us allowed us, there's a little quiz that you can take that kind of will help you determine what your skills align with. But even if you don't go through that particular process, I think for us and our team, if it was about really being self-aware and identifying what are the strengths that each one of us has as a leader in the business, what do we enjoy doing, what are our natural inclinations in terms of how we think about things. My background, I came from a back office. I was a trader for a number of years. I've loved spreadsheets. Like, I was the kid that when we went trick or treating in Halloween, I would come home and sort my candy and then make a spreadsheet in Excel in the 90s of my, which type of candy I got the most of. So this is always how my brain has worked. And so for us on our team, it was just natural that this was the role that I fit in really well. And so I think I know this maybe is kind of a simple answer to your question, Louis, but I think it's really about being self-aware in terms of each team member's strengths and what they like to do, because that's where somebody is going to be successful.
That is amazing. Shannon's coming out with benchmark reports in the 90s of what candy was most popular in this year and which one was least liked by your peers.
Absolutely. It's just always been who I am and it's how I think about things and that driving efficiency and I like to do it. And so I think for some people, this conversation is probably like nails on a chalkboard. And so, I'd be able to identify that this is a need in your firm, but if this isn't something that lights you up or is interesting, you need to find the right person on your team to task it with that wants to do it because it won't get done if you don't want to do it.
I would, the amount of times I've been on a sales call with an advisor who absolutely hates technology and workflows is very frequent. And I'm like, it doesn't matter how amazing Hubly is, like this likely might not work for you because this is not something that you're excited about and it's not something that you're going to implement long term and make part of your day to day. And so those conversations always transition to like, is there someone on your team who is and who you can empower with that responsibility? 99% of the time there is someone, they just haven't given that individual the ownership or the responsibility to lead that. And so I think that's really important insight that you touched on there that is crucial in order for any firm to scale, is just giving people permission to do the things that they love and also permission to do the things that they don't want to do, right? They don't have to do those.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you used a word there, empower. That's really important, especially for, I've thought a lot about our team and the implementation process because that was definitely a hurdle. Change is always hard, and change management is a topic that you can go read so many books about. But one of the things I think that really helped us on our team was we kind of put together some framework of these are the things that we think that we need to build workflows for. These are the people on our team that are going to use those workflows. So why don't we let those people build the workflows? And then as my role as COO and somebody who is, self-admittedly like very type A and controlling, of course I want to look at them and make sure that, I agree with the process, but there's so much more buy-in when the team members who are actually going to be using those workflows on a daily basis are the ones that are designing them. So we went so far as we would create time blocks in someone's day to say, hey, you can step away from your desk. You can go into the conference room for this time period. You don't have to worry about answering phones. You don't have to be on our, Teams chat, and you can just have focused time on working on your workflows. So we made it a priority for the team. We set goals in terms of we wanted to have workflows built by a certain date, and then we incentivize them. And whether that's through something like a spot bonus or an extra PTO day or something like that, really encouraging the team to, meet those deadlines. And then that was kind of at first, but then once the team started using the workflows and saw what Hubly was doing for their day to day and making their lives actually easier, then it kind of snowballed and people wanted to spend the time to develop workflows and continue to implement them. So I think just that early momentum, I always warn people it could be a little bit tough, but the flip side of that is that there's a lot of great resources. Hubly and their onboarding process and trainers was incredibly helpful for us. We were able to take kind of some template workflows and then use them as an outline to develop our own and really customize and make them specific to us. But at least we got pointed in the right direction, so we weren't having to start with a blank page. So that was really helpful in that process.
Oh, that's fantastic. The blank page it's like the paradox of choice where I could build anything, but it's like, well, what do I build? So having that template to start off with and then inject your secret sauce has to be great. And you need both personalities. And I love that you were able to incentivize it. And sometimes that's just the way that you have to get things done and make sure people are motivated by what motivates them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you mentioned you started with templates. You worked with the complimentary consultation with Hubly. From there, was it a matter of getting the team together and whiteboarding what you're going to change, or was it more in the moment, like we're opening up a new account, we should add this into the Hubly workflow? What was that process like?
So I think the first thing that we did was really think about what are the workflows that we want to focus on and develop. And so for us, that was thinking about what are the most kind of detailed or time intensive processes that we have that we need to make sure that things don't get lost. And so for us in that, we identified, I would say probably three major areas where we wanted to develop processes. The first was, just selfishly from the advisor's perspective, was that leads process and the process of going through, meeting with someone, proposing to them, and then getting that commitment and moving forward with them. That was very important for us, obviously. And then from a servicing standpoint, we had the new accounts team and that whole process of opening accounts and getting new accounts funded. And then the last one that was very important was the money movement functions, because those things happen every single day. And while they seem simple, there are a lot of steps in there and there's a lot of information. If it's a retirement account, we need to make sure that we've got the right withholding information, that sort of thing. So those are really the three areas that we focused on from the beginning. I was obviously very heavily involved with the development of our leads process. And so for that one, myself and my two advisor partners, we sat down and we talked about, okay, well, how do we typically do things? And if we wanted to visually see this process, what stages would we want to see them in? I think for us, that's been one of the biggest benefits of Hubly, is to be able to visually see someone move through a process so that you can understand, hey, this is where they're at now. What does it take to get them to the next area? So that we really talked about, okay, well, first step, scheduling them. The next step is that initial consultation. From there, they go to proposal. From there, they go to implementation. And then we really talked through what are each one of the steps in there. One thing that's been really crucial for us in the leads process is Hubly's ability for us to create forms in there, which what that allowed us to do is to, for example, at each one of those stages, we get a lead in, we're trying to schedule them. Well, what is the outcome of that workflow? Are they unresponsive? Do they turn down a meeting? Sometimes that happens. Do they schedule a meeting? Then they move to the next step, that initial consultation. What's the outcome of that? Are we going to put a free proposal together for them? Are we going to do a financial planning fee for them? And so what that allows us to do is then with the Insights tool, we can export that information and look at, of all of the leads that we got, we met with 85% of them. Of the 85% that we met with, we put together a free proposal for 60% of them. And then it allows us to see kind of, hey, where is our conversion breaking down? Like, where are we not being the most efficient, continuing to move people through this process? So it really allows us that kind of data to go back and look at, and then therefore modify our workflows and our proposals. Hey, why is this not as successful as we want it to be? Should we be adding more follow-ups? Should we be adding a deliverable here? And so it is that constant evolution of, we started with a framework based on a conversation, but then as people are using the workflows, it turns out, hey, in our minds it was going to work this way, but in practice it actually didn't. So we need to modify it.
Yeah, that's got to feel so good, because if you're not doing that, it's almost like you're filling a water in a bucket and there's a hole in the bucket and everyone's wondering why the bucket isn't filling up. That's really got to feel good to accomplish that. And especially just leads in general, like you mentioned, there's a whole cadence involved with just that process that could just slip through the cracks if people aren't careful.
Absolutely.
What have you put in those forms? Maybe like open-ended questions, or are they?
So we use forms in the leads process. We track things like the source of that lead, where did they come from? And then we also, as I mentioned, track outcome. And we use the drop-down feature for outcome so that we can easily then sort our exports by, and it's easier for us to then take that data and turn it into numbers. But we use forms across the board, not just in that process, but everywhere. I think one of the first things that we implemented that was really useful for us was all of our funding workflows, whether that's a TOA or a check coming in. We put a form in there called funded in all those workflows. And then what we're able to do is we're able to pull the input of that funded form field for a specific time period. And that's how we track our incoming AUM. So it allows us to see for this week or this month or this quarter, this is how much AUM we had come in. So that was kind of a basic thing that was very useful to us. We have since then developed more uses for forms, now to the point of part of our new account process is a workflow called intake. And that workflow has all of the pieces of information that our new accounts team is going to need, both about the client and then also each individual account that we're opening. And what that allows us to do is make sure that the new account team has all of the information that they need. Because sometimes an advisor might give instructions and think they're complete, but it's much more obvious when there is a blank field and nothing in it that, hey, the new accounts team is missing this piece of information. So forms has really helped us, and we're still finding, new opportunities to kind of add that in there.
Yeah, that's where your operations test, where it's
Mhm.
out in the field being tested constantly, really probably gets that perfect process. And would you say that, a best practice is just to think about that end goal when you are working with your workflows and implementation is like your end goal was to know that how much AUM is coming in. So you
Mhm.
almost like work backwards where knowing that's the goal, you want this form so you could make this report.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think whether that is, thinking about what you want internally or also what you want the client's experience to be like, and then working back from there to build the process around making that happen is very important. Internally, I think the reporting feature is very helpful, and we want to think about that. But also, one of the things that really mattered to us was the communication and the work between our teams. Was there a frustration point that was happening with the new accounts team because they weren't getting information that they needed, or how were handoffs happening when, multiple teams are involved in a process? And being able to kind of set those expectations through development of a workflow has really helped. Another area that I would say that Insights has been really helpful for us, which is related to that, is being able to see how long a client is in a workflow or how long something is taking. We were able to identify, hey, what are some of the bottlenecks in these processes? What is taking longer than it should? What are some of the common problems that we run into? And how can we fix those problems? Not necessarily always by changing a workflow, but is there something in another piece of our technology that we are missing, or in the information that we are delivering to our teams? It really allows us to see where things are getting stuck visually, because you can kind of have a feel for where things are getting stuck, but until you have that information, you're not sure.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know. So until you're there, you kind of spotlight it. Tell me about vacations. Has your team been able to take it
Mhm.
now that workflows are implemented? What happens when somebody's out of the office? What if something is assigned out to them? How do you guys handle all of that?
Mhm. Absolutely. We had a real world test of this recently. We've had multiple maternity leaves on our team, and so we've had to have team members step in and kind of take over things. And so it is Hubly's just crucial for that, because when a maternity leave, of course, is expected, and we know to plan ahead for that. But if somebody is sick or if somebody has a family emergency, our team is then able to step in and actually toggle to that team member who's not there, toggle to their tasks and able to see, okay, what did they have open pending that's due today? Where were they at in this process? We can go look at their notes and see, oh, they had reached out to the client and the client said, they were going to send it on Tuesday or whatever it is. So we're able to make sure that there's nothing falling through the cracks when somebody steps away. Because we're not reliant on what's in their brain or what's in their own personal system of to-do tracking and follow-ups. Everything is public. And for us as an ensemble, I think that is really crucial and really helps us service our clients well. Because when a client calls in, any team member, advisor included, is able to pull that client up in Hubly and is able to look at, okay, what work do we have open and pending for them right now? Is there a team member that was waiting for a voided check from this particular client? Hey, while I'm on the phone with them, I can just remind them we still need this. Or what are the things that we worked on for them recently? I mean, just things as simple as we have a client call in and say, Oh yeah, I was talking to someone about a distribution and I need to call them back. Well, who was it? We have 8 staff members, but whoever answers the phone is able to look at, oh, okay, that was, Carrie that was working with that client. So it all keeps us on the same page from a, efficiency perspective. But the other great thing about that is that we're able to, we even do things like when a client has a family event or a personal life event, we send cards, sympathy cards, or if they had a surgery, a get well soon card. And our whole team is able to see what's going on with the client. So even from an interacting perspective, making sure that, we know what's happening with that client's life and they're not, just a stranger. They feel like they really are serviced by the whole team.
I love that. That's where you definitely take it to that next level, and what sets every advisor apart from other advisors or robo advisors is that relationship piece. And even just running a business, every interaction with your brand should be documented or should be able to be seen by other members of the team. So, like you said, if they call in, I talk to this person, you aren't just a deer in headlights, like you talk to who about what.
Sure.
You can really
Absolutely.
get that big picture view.
Nora, if I may jump in here because it's funny. You've touched on so many pieces, Shannon, and I get this question all the time from advisors and their teams who jump on sales calls with me or demos. They're trying to quantify the value or the ROI that Hubly could bring to their firm. I don't think Hubly is an inexpensive solution, and so you've mentioned a couple of things, right? Like team productivity. You've mentioned, potentially AUM growth. You've mentioned, team happiness. You've mentioned all of these things that it's potentially in a qualitative way, benefiting the practice. I guess, how do you continue to think about the benefit of workflows and processes in the firm? And how do you think about the value and why do you keep investing in them?
So there's so many. I think the first ones that come to mind are around the people. It matters a lot to us. We care so much about culture, and it matters a lot to us that our people are happy and want to come to work every day. And so a big piece of that is autonomy. And so I think when there is this process and this tool in place where someone knows what they're expected to do, and if they need help with something, that they can delegate that task to a team member and allowing them to work with each other on that. It makes it so that the management is not having to get involved in saying, well, this is how it needs to be done. It's like, no, this is our tool that we all worked on together and agreed that this is the way that is most effective for it to be done. So I think that's kind of a touchy feely benefit to Hubly, certainly. But I think it really matters. And then the other things that come to mind are, I think a lot of people, not particularly our firm, but a lot of people also are thinking about the future and exit strategy. And I think that, it would be, irresponsible to not talk about the value that Hubly brings to a firm in terms of making that business then, transferable to somebody else, where there is kind of this manual in place for this is how the business runs. And so I think there's a lot of value in that, for those who are thinking about the valuation of their practice. But very similarly related to that, for a growing practice, for somebody like us who is not, planning on exiting anytime soon, is we've had new staff members come on board. And the difference in the kind of one-on-one time that's involved in training when there are workflows versus when there's not is enormous, because somebody still needs to be trained and have examples of watching someone do things. And but when there are workflows in place, there is so much more for them to be able to use as a resource to solve their own problems while they're learning before needing to go to a team member. So that has been super helpful for our new hires to have, that kind of as a framework. The other side of that, I would say, is that those new team members and their fresh eyes looking at how we do things has also helped us make our workflows better. Because there might be things that our experienced team members don't even think about that they're doing when they're going through a process, because it's just second nature to them. But a new team member might say, hey, in this process, there really should be a step that says you need to do ABC. So we add that process in there. So it really kind of is a two-way street. I think for us, what Hubly has done is really allowed for this level of confidence in our service, um, that allows us then to continue to grow the business without worrying about being able to deliver a consistent, very excellent level of service, both to our existing clients and then those new clients as well. So for us, it's absolutely a growth tool. It's freed up time that we used to dedicate towards, resolving NIGOs or following up on things or missed opportunities even. But it's given us a lot more time to then work on the business and continuing to grow it.
Well, yeah, so to just recap those three items, and it's the ones I always mention, so I'm glad hopefully I'm doing something right in my job, is employee happiness and productivity, which I think is so crucial. And I've seen the impact of that just at Hubly. We obviously think a lot about workflows in our business, different business from a technology, venture standpoint. Um, Two is really around it being a growth mechanism, either in terms of efficiency, confidence in delivery of your service, your team's capacity. There's a number of ways to evaluate it or think about it, and every firm's a little bit different. And I think the last thing that building a flywheel that is operating or business is like you end up increasing enterprise value one way or another. If that's going to be in dividend payments to you as the shareholder in the firm, or in terms of exit value of the firm if you ever go down the acquisition path, that's valuable. And so really great insights there. Thanks for sharing. I thought, Shannon, just because I thought it might be cute, do you remember the objective that you came to Hubly with 3 years ago?
I don't.
So we actually have it in our CRM. So
Oh, good.
I pulled that up because I thought it'd be great to bring it up and let you know you've accomplished that. So your objective that you wrote down in our onboarding form that we had 3 years ago was um, to have the visibility to open tasks. So when someone is out, the team knows exactly what needs to be handled. That was the objective that your team had 3 years ago. So
Mission accomplished and so much more. It's funny because
Nice.
that, at the time when I wrote that, that must have been a huge issue for us. And now it's like it's so much of a non-issue. It just doesn't even seem to be, it's not top of mind for me anymore because we don't worry about that anymore. When somebody's unexpectedly out, we know exactly what was on their plate. We know what, needs to be done. So that as an objective was absolutely, we crushed that and then so much more.
curious, just to come back to the first thing you mentioned around workflows being a culture and a mindset that you guys have created. Are there any goals or objectives that you still have outstanding that you're continuing to focus or work on?
I think for us, it's really about we now have the workflows in place. Not all of them. We'll continue to develop new ones, but to allow us to see where we're at in terms of open items. But I think for us, with these new hires recently, we've really seen the value in creating that kind of SOP with the workflow. So being able to use features like Hubly's task details to link to certain resources or items on our shared drives, for example, to be able to say, hey, when you are opening this new account, you've got to do steps 1, 2, and 3. Here is the detailed standard operating procedure with screenshots and that sort of things. And there's other technology, whether that's Scribe or those sort of tools that can help create those standard operating procedures, and then really linking them into Hubly. So just making Hubly that sort of one-stop shop for everything on our team is kind of my big push. I would like to see us do a better job of documenting We've got the tasks and the steps in there, but just making notes, doing that through Hubly. I think this new feature that we have just recently been granted about the ability to kind of make notes and edit those notes before they get published, I think that's interesting to us to kind of talk about what are the best practices around that for our team. So there's always going to be things that we want to continue to, develop and have a better use of Hubly. But I don't know how we did business without Hubly. we really rely on it. So it's thank you for the tool.
You're very welcome.
Louis documenting that in the CRM now, so he'll follow up with you again and make sure that that documentation goal
Mhm.
is then going to be
Mhm.
accomplished as well. Louis cares so much. That's awesome.
There's a new feature I'm working on, Shannon, in relation to that. So
Uh-oh.
you'll hear from me in the coming, we'll see, month or
Perfect.
so. Yeah.
And
So
this does not surprise you, Louis, but if you ever, need feedback about what to work on next, our team always has some ideas for you.
I love that. And Louis down. He'll listen. He'll get it done. So,
I can absolutely attest to that. Already in the 3 years that we've been here, there's been things that we've asked for that we've gotten. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah, I love that. So we'll just close with, I know when I'm out in the field, you kind of see some staff members really excited about it, wanting to implement it, but sometimes there's a bottleneck internally, well, where maybe somebody isn't listening or the staff can say it until they're blue in the face and they won't listen. Shannon, I think that if you say something right now, it might help with that. What would you tell somebody or a firm if they were kind of on the fence or worried about implementation? What would you suggest?
We really have not had a problem with adoption once we got through that first hurdle of changing the way that somebody does something. That's the hard part, is getting that movement from the way things have always been done to a new process or a new system. And so that's why those items that I talked about before about getting those team members involved in the development, really asking for their opinion. And even if there are team members that are not necessarily super, savvy in terms of technology, where they might not be the ones that are able to build the workflows, with conditional, next tasks and those sort of things. But having someone who is savvy sit down with that person and say, okay, explain this process to me. How would you want this to work? Ideally, if you're having an issue with the way that this is popping up in your queue, how would you like it to work? And then having that team member who does have the capabilities kind of tailor the workflow to that person. And then, so after that, kind of the friction of that development and getting it to where people are comfortable, as I mentioned earlier, there really was this snowball effect where people started to see the benefits to themselves and their team. And then it just became people wanted to move forward with it. What we did for several weeks when we first onboarded Hubly was just, I would have some reminders every staff meeting about best practices in Hubly. I mean, simple things like, when a workflow is completed, all the tasks are done, like you can complete the workflow. Or vice versa, if all the tasks are not done, even if yours is the last task, don't complete the workflow. It's those kind of simple best practices things that we had to remind team members of, and make sure that, everybody was on the same page with that. The one thing I will say about adoption, specifically also from an advisor perspective, is I think some advisors that I've talked to, there's been a hesitancy of adopting Hubly because they don't want to spend a lot of time in Hubly as a tool, launching workflows and that sort of thing, which I completely understand. Most advisors probably do not share the excitement that I have about workflows. And that's, we've even seen that on our team. And so what we decided to do on our team was we made workflows to help keep advisors out of having to launch the workflow, right? So our client review process, There are a few tasks that the advisor does, but the advisor, for example, will list out all of the follow-up items that need to happen. Like that's one of their tasks, is making a note of all of the follow-up items that need to happen. And then we have a team member, a paraplanner, actually go into Hubly and launch the appropriate workflows with all the details. So I bring that up just to say, like, you as the advisor or the leader of the firm are not committing yourself to spending all of this time in a new operational system if you don't want to. There's ways to develop systems and utilize your team so that the work can still get done and tracked in Hubly, but you don't actually have to be the one that does
Preach, Shannon. This is such an important topic that I think is actually a really good one to potentially end on. Is I get this question all the time from different teams. Is it is generally brought up like this: we have this, generally speaking, older advisor who does not want to touch technology, barely wants to use email, right? And getting them to adopt new technology is like a non-starter, and that's okay. Like you can still successfully implement workflows even having that person never touch the workflows. The question then becomes, what do you need to set up in your workflow to interact with someone who is not going to be in that workflow? So maybe it is, part of the workflow comes print off, these items and hand deliver it to that individual, right? The question is, how do we develop the workflow to potentially work with that individual? And it doesn't mean you don't need workflows. And I've seen some firms really successfully implement that. We also have quite a bit of tools at Hubly that help make that easier, where you can send reports and updates automatically to that individual outside of the system, so they know what's happening in the system, but they don't necessarily need to interact with the system. And so there's lots of options there that I think are totally fine ways to implement workflows, and have been done very successfully by many folks.
And Nora, one of the things that you asked me earlier that I didn't answer was about our tech stack. And so obviously Hubly is kind of the hub of what we do. But we've also recently implemented an AI note taker. We personally use Zox, which has been fabulous for us. And I think, Louis, to your point, that has really helped us with bridging that gap between the person that's not in the system and the person that does actually need to do the work in the system. If you can get that, non-technology adopting person to simply like have a note taker with them in that meeting, which is very easy to do on a Zoom or, a call or an app on the phone. If that can be accomplished, then there is a record of, hey, these are the things that we told the client that we were going to do. And that really has helped us bridge the gap too, between making sure that the client conversation actually gets, implemented in workflows.
Yeah, it's an exciting time right now with the technology that's supporting, but there has to be people like you, Shannon, and your team that is able to take it and run with it and really offer that high level of customer service to your clients. So, congratulations on being so successful, and I know your clients probably love it just as much as your team, taking care of your team. I really see that shining from you, and you're such a great leader. So, I definitely want to let you know that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for your time today. We did have Kelly ask what was the name of the book again, and Louis did answer that the book that was mentioned was Rocket Fuel and the Entrepreneurship Operating System. So
Mhm.
that's great. I think that you just delivered a book recommendation. So thank you so much for your insight. Thank you for jumping on with us. I'm sure this added a lot of value to a lot of offices, and we look forward to continue to working with you and, adjusting as you see things come up, any feature enhancements, let us know and we're happy to help.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.